Red Hook Tavern not only serves a burger that's regarded as one of the best in New York City, it's considered to be one of the best in the country and subsequently the world. I've been wanting to try that burger for years and I finally made it happen, but unfortunately it fell a bit short of my expectations. Plus, I found the restaurant as a whole to be a bit disappointing, which made me ponder if Red Hook Tavern was indeed overrated.
It's a beautiful day today here in the fine New York City neighborhood of Red Hook, Brooklyn. I came here today to have a very special burger, a burger that I've been lusting after for years. I am talking about the burger from Red Hook Tavern. The Red Hook Tavern burger is legendary. Now, it often appears on lists listing the best burgers in New York City, but it also appears on lists listing the best burgers in the country and the world. Now, like I've said, I've been wanting to try this burger for a long time, so why the hell has it taken me this long to finally try it? Well, the problem is quite simple. The restaurant, as its name implies, is located in Red Hook, Brooklyn, which isn't the easiest place to travel to. The nearest subway stop isn't the most accessible. Instead, I traveled by ferry. However, traveling by ferry is still quite the journey, as it took me over an hour and a half to get here. Although that trip could be much less depending on where you're coming from. I had to start from my home neighborhood in Astoria, Queens, and I ended up having to transfer to another ferry to end up getting here. But it was at least a scenic journey. Nevertheless, I will travel for food, especially when it comes to burgers. Now, I had high hopes for Red Hook Tavern. I felt that their burger had a great chance of not only being top tier, but also becoming one of my favorite burgers of all time. Unfortunately, the burger and restaurant didn't quite live up to my lofty expectations. So with that being said, this was my experience at Red Hook Tavern having their legendary burger.
Red Hook Tavern is unsurprisingly located in Red Hook, Brooklyn. The restaurant opened in 2019 after years in the making. Originally, the establishment was announced back in 2016, and at the time, it was meant to be a fried chicken restaurant. However, that concept evolved to what Red Hook Tavern is today, which is a restaurant that takes inspiration from a number of classic New York City eateries like Peter Luger and Corner Bistro. Red Hook Tavern is the product of Chef Billy Durney, who made a name for himself with his first restaurant, Hometown Barbecue, which is located just blocks away from Red Hook Tavern. The establishment has a Michelin Bib Gourmand and is considered to be one of the best spots for barbecue in the city. In fact, I had the greatest pastrami sandwich of my life at Hometown Barbecue, so I was hoping that I would have another amazing culinary experience at Durney's follow-up restaurant, Red Hook Tavern. I arrived to the restaurant about 35 minutes before it opened on a Friday for lunch. Reservations for Red Hook Tavern are highly sought after, but not impossible to come by. However, getting seated as a walk-in is very doable, and a sizable line formed behind me as I passed the time reading my book. Eventually, the restaurant opened and I was soon seated at the bar. As I took in the space, I liked what I saw. Red Hook Tavern is small but cozy. It has a rustic, classic tavern feel that exudes old-school New York. The place actually reminded me of one of my all-time favorite restaurants, Longman and Eagle in Chicago. Yeah, the tables are a bit close together, but that's par for the course with a lot of New York City restaurants. Overall, I really appreciated the atmosphere of Red Hook Tavern. Once I was settled, I began to explore the menu. The restaurant serves classic American fare, and I definitely liked what I saw. Now, Red Hook Tavern's menu does differ a bit between lunch and dinner. Dinner is definitely the superior menu of the two, as it contains more courses and frankly more exciting dishes. However, both menus contain the burger, and that's what I was there for, so I was perfectly fine with the lunch menu. Next, I perused the beverage offerings. There was wine by the glass as well as beer. That day, however, I was intrigued by the cocktails and there were some nice sounding options. I decided to go with the restaurant's take on one of my all-time favorite cocktails, the Martini. Red Hook Tavern's version is called the Duke's Martini and contains overproof gin and vodka, Amalfi lemon oil, salted cucumber, and a Chambéry vermouth. What surprised me was just how fast I received my drink after I ordered. I don't think that I've ever had a martini martini prepared that quickly before. That got me to wonder if that was actually a pre-mixed, batched cocktail. Nevertheless, I was still excited to give it a go, and I was mostly satisfied. The character of a good martini was nearly there. It had a good hit of alcohol, and it hit nicely. However, the issue was the temperature. Frankly, it wasn't as cold as a martini should be. Now, it wasn't warm or anything. It was cool, but not freezer cold like it says on the menu. Having a cold martini is integral to the quality of the drink, as a martini doesn't contain ice and thus will lose its chill more rapidly than other mixed drinks. In fact, when I was at the New York City steakhouse Gui, they take the temperature of their martinis so seriously there that they literally encase their gin and vodka in a block of ice. Now, I wasn't expecting that at Red Hook Tavern, but I was expecting a bit more. Thankfully, it was still an enjoyable martini, but frankly, it could have been better if it was properly chilled. First up in terms of food was my appetizer, the French onion soup. It contained sourdough and Austrian Gruyere. I liked the look of the dish. It had a rustic appearance, although the cheese looked a little overdone. Still, I was very excited to try that soup. For my first taste, I went in cautiously. It was French onion soup after all. That first sip was all about the broth. It was nice, rich and tasty. For my second bite, I got a bit more action as I got to taste the sourdough and cheese, which were delightful. That dish was nicely filled with a good proportion of onions and bread. It was by no means a weak and watery soup. The dish felt like the perfect thing to have on a cold winter's day, but I still enjoyed it even in the middle of summer. However, I did have an issue with the top layer of cheese, which seemed a bit overdone for my liking. It basically felt like a tough lid covering the soup that didn't really equate to a satisfying cheese pull and an enjoyable level of cheesiness. To put it plainly, I prefer to have a bit more gooiness with regards to the cheese in my French onion soup. I thought that maybe I got a bit unlucky with how long my soup was cooked, so after my lunch I checked out photos of the dish on Google Reviews, and it actually seems like that's just how they make their French onion soup. In fact, I even saw far toastier versions of the dish than mine was. Nevertheless, I still thought that it was a good French onion soup, and that top layer of cheese was just one minor factor in what was mostly a satisfying appetizer. After finishing, it was time for what pretty much what everyone was at the restaurant for, the burger, and it was a beautiful sight. It's fair to say that that dish helped make the restaurant. In the New York Times review of Red Hook Tavern, where it earned a respectable 1 star, Pete Wells largely focused his article on the burger. It's a dish that almost always appears on any list covering the best burgers in New York City, the United States, and even the world. For me, it's the one burger out of all the others in NYC that I've yet to try that I was most excited to do so. I eagerly dove into that burger, and I was both impressed and unfortunately disappointed. First, let's consider the positives. The dry-aged flavor of that meat was outstanding. The thick 8-ounce patty consisted of half 45-day dry-aged New York strip and half hanger steak. 45 days is impressive. In fact, that's typically longer than what most steakhouses age their steaks for. The result was a patty that had the most funky, rich, intense, and luxurious dry-aged flavor. There are only 2 other New York City burgers that I've had that have comparable dry-aged intensity, which include my all-time favorite, the Minetta Tavern Black Label Burger, along with the burger at La Bee. In fact, the burger at La Bee also contains 45-day dry-aged beef. To put it simply, I loved the taste of the meat of Red Hook Tavern's burger. In terms of how it was cooked, that was a bit of a mixed bag. I asked for it to be cooked to a medium rare, and it ended up being more of a medium, which isn't that big of a deal since it was still fairly juicy. The sear, on the other hand, was absolutely perfect. However, the most significant issue I had with that burger was its grind. Not everything was ground down like it should have been. While I was chewing that soft, luscious, spectacular dry-aged beef, I bit down on something that felt like a small pebble. Sometimes tiny pieces of connective tissue, gristle, or bone fragments make it into a burger patty. It's rare, but it happens. In the past when I've experienced that, it's usually with cheap cheaper products like burgers from the grocery store. Having to fish out hard little bits was not fun. In fact, every subsequent bite I took, I just couldn't enjoy it, no matter how great the beef tasted, because I was concerned that I would bite down on another hard little speck. In the end, there were at least 3 hard, tiny pieces of matter that shouldn't have been in my burger. But that wasn't the only issue, as it was pretty salty. In fact, it felt like it was over-seasoned. On the bottom of the burger was a raw onion, which is reminiscent of how the burgers are prepared at Peter Luger. In fact, the Luger burger is what Red Hook Tavern's offering is partly modeled after. Unfortunately, because of how salty my burger was, I really couldn't taste that onion at all. In fact, the only real reminder I had that there was an onion on the burger was that it kept falling off and I kept trying to put it back on. The bun at least was good. It was nicely toasted and was able to absorb the patty's juices very well. Regarding the American cheese, well, that's pretty much the ideal cheese for a cheeseburger, so I was happy with that. Overall, my burger was a mixed bag. Despite the flaws, it was still enjoyable. Like I said, that dry-aged flavor was outstanding. However, it was clear that I was not having the same quality of a burger that garnered so much praise. Because of that, it wouldn't be fair of me to give that burger a score. I feel that I should have sent it back. The high amount of salt and the few pebbly bits inside the patty would have more than justified the action. Although I hardly ever send back food at a restaurant. Plus, I kept making excuses for the burger in my head because I really wanted to love it, and even with its flaws, it was still good. But one thing that wasn't very good were the fries. Frankly, they were the definition of mid. On the menu, the restaurant refers to them as frites, which I found pretty amusing. Red Hook Tavern utilizes cottage fries, which may be a nod to the legendary J.G. Millen, but to be fair, I'm not a fan of J.G. Millen's fries either. While even though Red Hook Tavern's fries were texturally on point, their flavor was unfortunately bland. Although I may have enjoyed those fries a bit more had my burger not been so salty, my palate simply would have been more in tune. To put it plainly, I would have much preferred more traditional, simply made fries to be paired with the burger. The fries don't have to be complicated, it's the burger everyone cares about, but the fries shouldn't be an afterthought either. Overall, the only reliable piece of food on that plate was the pickle, which was fine. Finally, it was time for dessert. Red Hook Tavern doesn't have many options in that regard, and the few desserts they do have are crafted by others. I figured I would go with the gelato, which seemed like a refreshing follow-up to my salty burger. Unfortunately, I was told that the restaurant ran out of it. It just wasn't my day. They did still have the sorbet, but I figured I would go for the rainbow cookies instead, since that's probably their most famous dessert. There were 4 cookies to an order, and they certainly looked good. Now those were solid rainbow cookies. Both the flavor and texture were spot on. I really enjoyed them, and it was at least nice to end my lunch on a positive note. Although, I've gotta be honest, I don't consider rainbow cookies to be much of an interesting dessert. I mean, you get them for free at places like Carbone and Chirisi in addition to whatever dessert you order. Plus, I wasn't a fan of the $14 price tag either. Still, for what they were, those cookies were delicious. To sum it up, my experience at Red Hook Tavern wasn't the best. Now, it wasn't bad, it was still pretty good, but it was largely a letdown. Frankly, I felt that I was unlucky that day. It happens. Even great restaurants aren't perfect. However, Red Hook Tavern could definitely improve things in certain areas. Now, it seems to me that the restaurant group has plans of expansion, but their success will be heavily dependent on consistency. For instance, right next door to Red Hook Tavern is a new spot opened by Billy Durney called Tavern Next Door. In fact, you could even get the famous Red Hook Tavern burger there without the fuss that usually comes with dining at the original spot. So far, it seems like people really like Tavern Next Door. By contrast, Durney's Hamptons restaurant has frankly scary reviews on Yelp. For me, however, I definitely have to return to Red Hook Tavern. I still believe it's a great restaurant and that I just had some bad luck. After finishing, it was time for the bill, which totaled to $94.72, but with my tip, I spent almost $114.
So that was a pretty good meal. Now, the problem is, with a place like Red Hook Tavern, good just doesn't quite cut it, especially with regards to the restaurant's lofty reputation. Their burger was great, but unfortunately it just wasn't quite top tier, at least today. I loved that burger's dry aged flavor, but unfortunately that's all I really got from it, that dry aged flavor and a lot of salt. Plus, I also think I just had some bad luck today. I mean, the cook wasn't quite there and the grind of the meat could have been better. Still, I'm glad I finally tried the burger and I still enjoyed it. I think next time it will probably be a bit better, I'm hoping. Anyway, with regards to the other food I had, it was certainly good, just nothing special. The French onion soup was certainly solid, it just wasn't much better than any other French onion soup out there. The fries with the burger were satisfying, but largely forgettable. The rainbow cookies I had for dessert were definitely good, but I just wouldn't recommend having dessert at Red Hook Tavern. It's clearly not a dessert restaurant. Overall, nothing was bad today. Like I said, everything was pretty good. It's just I was really hoping that I would love Red Hook Tavern, and that just wasn't the case. Regardless, I would still love to return to Red Hook Tavern one day, but for now, I have got to get something to drink. That burger was salty.